Well, coming up now in an 86 Buick Grand National 231 V6 edition, it's Lawrence Conley out of Humboldt, Texas.
His opponent, David Edwards, out of Hopkinsville, Kentucky, a 1970 Chevelle 396 with a 325 horsepower rating.
Well, I'll tell you what, Conley, one of the many Grand National drivers of the day, has the advantage. They come off the concrete.
Dan, it doesn't look like the Chevelle can catch him from here.
No, it doesn't. Conley with the big win here, 12-14 at 111.91 miles per hour.
The losing effort of 14:43.
Jeff Church, also up in a group Buick Grand National, the V6 edition. Church out of Alliance, Ohio, a mechanic by trade.
His opponent will be Larry Fleming out of Franklin, Kentucky in the 1969 Dodge Coronet RT. Look at this, Dan, 426 HEMI.
This ought to be an interesting race, Mike. 231 cubic inches of V6 up against the big HEMI. And it looks like the Grand National, again, with the advantage off the line. So evidently they're finding the right numbers as they come off those trees, and it looks like he's going to have a set of right numbers at the end of the race. He does, 13-15 at 101 miles per hour.
Great race there.
Well, Greg Booth, also up in the 87 edition of the Grand National. Greg out of Louisville, Kentucky.
Dan, a real interesting story in the Budweiser lane. Again, it's a car owned by Larry Fleming. This time it's Robbie, his son, at the wheel, out of Franklin, Kentucky. And look at this. The 70 Plymouth Cuda that he's driving does have the advantage at the half track.
But watch this Grand National come on at the end, Mike. He is awesome. 13:43 on the win to a losing 13:83.
What a surprise for the Fleming team. Up now, it's Bruce Gammon out of Columbia, Missouri in his 1971 Chevrolet, Monte Carlo, Dan, SS 454.
Well, if you like Grand Nationals, you're going to love this. J.C. Brown out of Liberty, Kentucky, his 87 Grand National with the big advantage right here.
Well, I tell you, the Buicks are really having a great day in this stock, in the junior stock class. Up now, Frederick Monet out of Tupper Lake, New York. Long way from home for this guy. 1963 Chevy Impala. It's a red with a 327, and it's a 4-speed car. And again, that lane seems to be giving problems to these cars with 4 speeds.
Well, I'll tell you what, the Winston lane, no problem for the 87 Buick Grand Nationals. This one, Lloyd Tarter, hometown boy out of Bowling Green, Kentucky, wins it 1296 at 104.16.
Well, the Impala really not in the hunt on this one. Still gives it a valiant effort. Goes through at a 1972. And now, Rodney Gaylor out of Lebanon, Ohio, is in his 73 Chevy Z28. He's in the Budweiser lane. Look at this, Dan. Right out of the gate, he brakes. It's also a 4-speed. Could be a U-joint or a clutch problem there.
Well, Dan Gillums has no problem as he picks up the win at an incredible 14:37. Well, here's Lawrence Conley in that 86 Buick Grand National, the 231 V6 edition.
Now, there's another Buick over in the Budweiser side, but it's an 87 version, and it belongs to Jeff Church.
And I'll bet you what, one thing, I bet they're both black.
And I bet a Buick wins this race.
You got it.
Look at this. They're starting to really stack up in the stage lanes. It's Buicks everywhere. Out front on the Budweiser side, the Winston side, excuse me.
Over here in the Winston lane, look at Conley as he just starts to walk away with this race now. Conley by a bunch as we head into the lights. 12:26 on the win.
You know, Dan, it's interesting to see that two identically prepared cars can be that different in performance.
You get that
Now
right.
Another pair of Buicks up. This time over in the Budweiser side, an 87 Buick Grand National belonging to J.C. Brown.
Well, we got an 87 a pair right here as Greg Booth lines up here in the Winston lane. And Booth just unleashes it as he comes off the line. Look at this, Mike. Major advantage going down.
Again, no contest, Dan, as clearly the Winston side takes it with a 13:36.
And I'll tell you what, that's hard to read through the smoke.
It really was. That'll bring up Lloyd Tarter in his 87 Buick Grand National. Again, Dan, it's black.
Well, it makes sense, doesn't it? Jim Rohrbaugh, he's the operation managers out of South Carolina. That's 70 Buick 455 GS over here in the Winston lane.
I'll tell you what, Tarter's got a race on his hands. I saw daylight under the front wheel of that Buick in the Winston side, Dan.
He was picking them up and proverbially putting them down, and look, he put him down. Look, 12:53 at 108.
Half a second quicker. Good
awesome
race.
Really. Well, the buy run this time goes to Dan Killams. Killams in that 87 Buick Regal. Drew the buy and in the Winston lane, by the way, so it's a sure win for me this time, Mike.
Yes, it is. You know, Dan, it's always great to get a buy when you go this deep into eliminations. It always gives you a little bit of a mental edge.
Sure does, and look, good numbers, 1396, 99.89. And here in the Winston lane is Greg Booth, the Louisville, Kentucky runner in that 87 Buick Grand National.
He's got a tough customer. T.D. Holland is up now again. And the AMX, the 1968 version, 390 cubic inches. Look at this, walking away with it, Dan.
Well, Booth could have just shut it off at the line. Holland hole shot at him big.
He really did. 4:20 reaction time on a 400 perfect tree. This guy really had his act together. Holland takes the win with a 12:22. Now, Conley was a no-show, so that brings up Dan Kellums in my lane, the Budweiser side. Dan Kellums in that 87 Buick Regal.
Well, he's against that 70 Buick 455 GS of Jim Rohrbaugh out of South Carolina, and Rohrbaugh just roared off with the win, it looks like.
One tough customer in that Buick on the Winston side, Dan. Look at that, 12:49 to a 13:89, a second and a half quicker.